Hey folks, welcome to Holy Sheets 2025. We have got another round of great Google Sheets training here. If you've attended this training before, if you watched it when we've done it virtually before, we're going to do a lot of similar things, but we're also going to sneak in a few new things this year, trying to keep pushing the boundaries of what we can do with Google Sheets, and we're going to kind of go from there. So first off, my name is Ian. I'm a digital teaching and learning specialist in Ogden School District. I've got all my contact information there. If you wanted to reach out, I'd be happy to support you through some of your Google Sheets challenges and things like that. Before we jump in, I'm just going to leave these two links here. If you want to pause and type in these bit.lys, these are two resources that might come in handy for you down the road. I'm going to talk us through a lot of these things today, but if you're not super familiar with spreadsheets in general, and especially Google Sheets, how we talk about rows and columns and cells and ranges, these might be great resources for you. So feel free to pause, type in those bit.lys and get these resources. Otherwise, like I said, we're going to kind of keep moving right along, and I'm going to refer back to the ideas that are on these sheets, but we're not going to necessarily need them for every piece that we're doing today. So that's going to lead us right in. I want to spend a majority of our time in a spreadsheet actually doing some work. We're going to be doing some formatting. We're going to bring some functions in. We're going to group and join up a couple pieces of data. And so I think we're going to hopefully push the boundaries of what we've done before and get some new information out there. So probably the easiest way to do this would be to type in that bit.ly. Feel free to pause if you need to. But once you type in that bit.ly, that's going to bring us to our practice data set. When I do that, I'm going to try and zoom in as much as possible, but feel free to pause and do some zooming on your own. I'm also going to take my camera off for the majority of the spreadsheet work. I just think it should make it a little bit easier. I won't be in the way covering up any cells or anything like that. So let's go ahead and we will jump in and let's start working with some data in Google Sheets. So once we're in Google Sheets, many of you have probably seen a spreadsheet that looks something like this. This is kind of a pretty basic education set of data. We've got student IDs, student names, we've got some subject areas and some assessments. This is pretty common, and we're going to use this to kind of build a lot of our data today. So the first thing that I always like to do when we talk about spreadsheets is talk a little bit about formatting. So I've given us an example down here. So if you come down to the second tab, you can see I've got the exact same data set, but we've done a little bit of work to it. And so a lot of this work now can be done very quickly, and I kind of want to go through and take a look at what that looks like. So one of the first things that I like to do is I like to work in a little more modern font. Proxima Nova is one of my favorite, Roboto. There's a lot of great ones. You can pick which one you're most interested in. And then one of the next things that I like to do, I like to make my header row bold. And then the one thing that has been really nice with some of the updates they've done with Google Sheets is we have this ability to do some what they call alternating color formatting. So if you come up to format, you come down to alternating colors right here, you're going to get several different options, and you've got some presets, some defaults. If you've got maybe some colors that you'd like to work with, I'm going to go ahead and stick with the default here, but I'm going to select Google Sheets green as my header, and we're going to kind of run with that. So I've got that set. You go ahead and click done here, and you'll notice it's applied those colors across everything. I always like to think a little bit about contrast as well. So now that we've got a darker header, I think it would actually look a little bit nicer if we maybe changed our text in our header to be white. So I'm going to do that. A lot of this work, it helps with the usability of the spreadsheet, and this is especially important with one of, I think, the key features in Google Sheets, which is the shareability of a Google Sheet. With any Google Sheet, you can always come up here and you can share it with a group of teachers. You can give them access to be able to just view it or edit it or so on. And when we have our data organized and really presentable, it makes that sharing process and collaboration process a lot easier. So that's why this is important. It may seem simple. It may even be unnecessary depending on your needs with your spreadsheet, but I do think that it gives us an opportunity to collaborate a little bit more effectively. The next thing that I'm going to take a look at here is this column here, column C. And as soon as I click on this, you'll notice I get a little pop-up down here that wants me to convert these to drop-down chips, which is exactly what we're going to do. If you wanted to look into that further, it's up here under Insert and Drop-Down. So if the pop-up isn't showing up, that's where you would find it. And this is another newer feature. We've always been able to create drop-downs in Google Sheets. However, we used to have to go into the data validation. We had to understand a little bit about how data validation worked and how to set up those rules. Not that that's a bad thing, but they've made that process so much easier. You can see that was one click. My entire column here has all been adjusted to these drop-down chips. And you can see they've applied a couple different colors. And if I click here, there is an edit button. I can come in here and I can change this. So let's say I don't like these colors. I want to do something else. I'm just going to kind of go down the list here and select these kind of key colors that they have there. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply that. We're going to click done, and there will be a box. I'm only in cell C2 right now, but it notices, oh yes, this rule actually applies to a lot of cells. Do you want to apply it to all of them? If you did just this instance, it would change the dropdown in C2, but it wouldn't change the dropdowns in all the rest. So I'm going to do apply to all. And now we get kind of updated our colors there. Not that that's really essential, but it just makes things a little bit brighter. And, you know, if you've got school colors that you want to use or you've got something else, go ahead and do that. And then if you ever need to come back to this, you can come here and you can click right back into those rules and you can make some adjustments. There are a few additional things here. You can add new options if you missed a subject or something like that. There are a few advanced options here for what happens if you, if you try to type in this cell, like was it going to give you a warning? In our case, it's preset to reject, which is fine. And then also, this is even more recent. This actually just showed up very recently. It allows us to select multiple selections, and so this might be appropriate for what you're looking to do, or it might not. But if I select this and come in here, I can now select multiple courses, or subjects in this case, I guess. And so you can go ahead and you can see you can do multiples here. So maybe depending on your situation and your data, that might be appropriate. In this case, where we've got these students in subjects and courses, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep this box unchecked. And so just, one course per student. And that's just going to make things a little bit simpler for us today. So I'll click done, and then I can close out of this sign panel here. And we've basically got our data kind of ready to go. You can compare with that other tab that I had put in there. Really the only difference there is I did a different alternating color. It's a light green. And then I did it looks like I adjusted the font size here. I can adjust that a little bit if we wanted as well to match. Just sometimes it's nice to have those headers stand out really well. The other thing that I actually realized I preset here, but is important to point out, when you first open a new Google Sheet, it will look like this. And these two dark gray lines up here in the box between A and 1, these are called freeze bars. And if you hover over them, you'll get the little hand, and you can drag that out to wherever you want. I usually set the horizontal freeze bar right underneath row 1, sometimes lower, but usually right underneath row 1, depending on my headers. And then I'll often set my vertical one just past the identifiers, in this case, the student name and their ID. And what this does is when we scroll now, it's going to keep those headers in place, which is really helpful. Makes things a lot easier when we have big sets of data and we're scrolling through things. Otherwise, if this wasn't here, move it back, and I scrolled, now I've lost my header. And if you've got just a few columns, that might be obvious, but sometimes it's not. And so having that freeze bar in place is really helpful. So once you've done these quick little things, we are really ready to jump in and do some work. We're able to do some functions, be able to start analyzing the data, start connecting the dots, which we know is not just about the numbers, right? We know in education these numbers represent students, they represent understandings, they represent what students know and don't know. And so it's really important that we get our data organized well so that we can tell the story that the student is going through. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start doing a couple quick functions, and then we're going to jump into a little bit more complicated ones. And then finally, we're going to do, I think, really one of the most complicated functions in Google Sheets, and we're going to bring together some bigger groups of data. And so let's go ahead and jump in with that, and then we will kind of keep pausing, give you a chance to kind of catch up as we go through everything. The nice thing about this being a video is you can pause, you can try it again. If something didn't work, go back and compare with our functions, and we'll go from there. So let's jump in with our first function, which is going to be a quick average. So here I am in cell I2. Basically, that's our first student, and I am down past all of our headers that we have here, and we're going to go ahead and put in an average. So we can go ahead and type that in as our header. And remember, because we already did our header formatting, all of the new pieces that I put in there, because we selected the entire row when we changed those things, all of those average pieces, or all of those formatting pieces, are already in place. So that gives us a quick opportunity to jump in and really start looking at this. So let's do an average. First off, any function that we put in Google Sheets is always going to start with an equal sign. So type that in, and then Google Sheets is going to start trying to guess what we want to do. And so you can see right here, I don't know if it heard me talking or it's just that good at guessing, but it wants us to put in an average. You could go ahead and select this right here, and it would apply the average. You can see the little dashed lines that it is placed in there for us. And that's actually exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to click there, and you can see it's now taken an average. If you double click back into it, it'll get us back into that editing screen so that we can kind of unpack this here. So average is typed out. That's our function. Google Sheets likes to have it in all caps, but that's not actually necessary. And then we always have an open and close parenthesis with some sort of a range inside. In this case, our range is cell E2 through cell H2. So E2 colon H2. And that just means that we have cell E2, F2, G2, and then although there's no data in there, cell H2 as well. And that's you're gonna see how that plays in here in just a little bit. So I'm actually gonna include that cell, even though it's empty, because we're gonna use it in a little bit. Now, although Google Sheets helped us out a lot with that, made it really fast, it's important for us to know actually how to do this. So let's actually go through the process. So I'm going to go down to cell I3, right below where we just were, and I want us to actually go through this step by step. So instead of just clicking on Google Sheets assumption, we're going to start typing the word average. And I don't even need to get very far, but you'll see Google Sheets is now pulling up functions that match. And average is the one right at the top, A-V-E-R-A-G-E. Just go ahead and I'm actually not going to click on that because it's going to fill it in for us. I'm actually going to keep typing. So I'm going to keep typing, and then I'm going to set the open parenthesis, and it is still really fighting to put that in there for us. The machine learning built into Google Sheets is getting so good. It's anticipating what we want to do, but what you can see here is by typing equals, typing out the full word average, and now we're going to type in that range, which we can see is cell E3 colon H3. And then we need to have that closed parenthesis at the end. And then when we hit enter, we're going to get that answer. Now, the nice thing, again, machine learning, it's really trying to anticipate what we want to do. And you can see now it's trying to fill down this average all the way down. And that actually is a great idea. I'd love to do that because I don't want to have to type this in every single time. However, this is a training. I'm going to actually reject this right now. You could click the check and it would fill it all down. I'm going to reject it because I want to talk through how we could do that otherwise. So the first thing that we could do is we could simply click here, copy, Control C, come down below, and do a paste, Control V, and we could keep doing this all the way down the list. And you can see that's working. If you double click into any one of these, you can see as I'm copying, it's actually shifting down our function. It's shifting down the range automatically. So this is cell was row 5, this is row 6, row 7, and so on, which is great. That's really smart of Google Sheets. That's exactly what I wanted to do, because if I were to copy this and it still kept us up here at the row we started with, that actually wouldn't be all that helpful. So now that's great, and that works really well. But we've got about 100 students here. It's not too many, but it would still take a minute or two to go all the way down the list and copy and paste. There's a better way. Go ahead and click into one of those cells that you have put the average in already, and you'll notice there's this little blue dot in the bottom corner that you can click on and drag. When you click and drag down, it's going to fill in that function for everything you have dragged down through. So you could do it for the first one up here and drag all the way down, or you could do the second one. It's just going to take whatever cell you're in, and it's going to drag that all the way down to the bottom. And that's great. That works really well. For our purposes today, that would actually probably be great. We could click here. We could click, drag, go all the way down to the bottom of our list, and we could catch all of these, and that would work really well. However, sometimes we have data sets that are so big that that even takes a lot of time. And so I'm actually going to go back. I'm just going to remove a few of these to show you this again. There is one other way that we can do this, and I am actually realizing here as I'm doing this, this is not going to work because this depends on data being right next to it. Let's see here. For right now, I'm actually going to rearrange these for just a second here. Yeah, it moved it out. I'm going to just do a quick change here. Bear with me. I'm actually going to put the average in right here, and I want that to be E. Okay. All right. The reason I did that, you'll see here in a second, because that click and drag method that we were using over here works great. However, if it's a really long list, that can still be time consuming, and there is a faster way. However, you have to have data next to it in order for this to work. So what we're going to do now, I just copied and pasted exactly where we were at, but I put it right here next to column G, which is test C. This would have worked if we had filled in this column, column I here, but I didn't do it in that order. So I wasn't thinking ahead there very well. But now that we're back here, I can actually take this blue dot, and instead of clicking and dragging, just double click. And what that will do is it's going to look down the data, and it's going to see how far does your data go, and it's going to fill down that average, the entire length of our data. And so you can see it stopped right here. We have no function below this. It stopped because our data stopped right here. And that's why I had to have it in this column right next to it. I'm going to undo. Let me just show you. Let's say we had student was absent. Down here, this is Victor. Student wasn't here when we took test C. And I go to do that exact same thing. It works, but it only goes until it recognizes that our data is finished. And although our data does continue down here, it's recognized that there's this gap, and so it stops. And that's why it's important, if you're going to use this one where you double click, you just have to make sure that your data is consistent all the way down, which is why if I came over here to where we were working as I started and I double clicked here, it actually wouldn't work because there's no data here to tell it where the data starts or stops. And so that is helpful information to know. It helps us to apply down that average. I'm actually going to do this one here, and I'm going to get rid of that column there because I actually would like it. I liked where I was headed before. It just did not help when that column was empty. So there we go. I'm kind of back to where I wanted to be. I have the averages here in column I. That is an average. If you double click into any one of these, you can see that's an average of all 4 of these columns, including the blank one that we're going to fill in here in just a moment. Now, one other thing before we leave this is a great time to talk about formatting in Google Sheets again. Decimals, you probably remember this from when you were in school. If you have a really long string of decimals, that actually isn't that helpful. It's precise, but it's not really that helpful, and it's actually hard to kind of interpret quickly. And so one of the things that we can do very quickly is come up here to our toolbar, and we can adjust the decimal places. And so you can see here, depending on your needs, you can go ahead and adjust the decimal places based on your data. So obviously some of these are repeating decimals because we are averaging 3 scores. So we're getting a lot of 1/3 and 2/3. For our purposes, it'd be nice if those were rounded off. And so I'm just going to select 1 decimal point. So now you can see I've got 17, I've got 19.3. I've got some 17.7s. That's where it has rounded the 6 repeating up to 7. So you just have to keep that in mind. Know that it is rounded. You have to understand that because it is part of our data story. but it's helpful to know that you can do that because a really long string of decimals isn't particularly helpful for us. So, all right, let's kind of recap where we've been here. We've talked about how to do a simple function. In this case, the average. We've also talked about how to fill down that function in several different ways. And we've talked about how Google Sheets will automatically shift our ranges as we copy and fill down, which is helpful because it allows us to review the rows separately. So what we can do here is we could come down, we could continue this work. We could put averages for each assessment down here at the bottom. We could average the column up. We could do several different things there, but we've done an average. We've talked about it. If you need more practice, feel free to jump back in and rewatch. I want to keep moving and talk about some other things that we can do with our data. So let's kind of shift and move forward here. We're going to talk about bringing some data together. We're going to talk about creating some filters, and then we're going to talk about bringing bigger groups of data together, and we'll kind of go from there. So let's just kind of pause there with the averages, and let's address this column H here. Let's come in and let's take a look at column H, and we're going to bring in some data from another tab here in just a moment. So you can see we have this column labeled Canvas Quiz, and that is slightly different than these other assessments we have. If we come down here, I've got a tab labeled More Data. Come down there, take a look at that. We also have ID numbers, we also have names, we have a SPED designation, and we have this Canvas Quiz here. And this is a pretty common thing in education where we have some assessment data in one place, and we have some other assessment data. Maybe it's from Canvas, maybe it's from our assessment system like Mastery Connect or Pair Assessment or whatever it might be. And we want to bring those data sets together. However, that's time consuming, especially if our list of students is in a different order or a student was absent or whatever that might be. We want to make sure that we're accurately bringing that data together. And in this case, you can see our names are in a different order. On this tab, they're alphabetical. On the tab we started with, the one that says raw data, you can see they are not alphabetical. In fact, it appears that they're in pretty random order. So it would be nice if we could kind of bring all that data together without having to do a whole bunch of work in manually bringing over score by score. So a couple things to keep in mind when we're going to do this. We're going to use a function called VLOOKUP or vertical lookup, and that function depends on the organization of our data. In this case, we have our student ID number out here in the first column, and then we have name and SPED designation and this quiz data. And you'll notice that quiz data is 4 columns over, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to come in handy here in just a second. So let's come back. First tab, raw data. We're going to come up here to H2. And remember, every single function starts with an equal sign. So start with that. And then we're just going to begin typing vertical lookup. So all I've typed in right now is VL, and there is VLOOKUP. It's the only function that matches that. So go ahead and click on that. And while we're here, we're going to talk about this card that pops up. I kind of ignored it when we were doing the average because the average is a little bit simpler function. VLOOKUP is more complex. So the average only had really one critical component, which was the range. VLOOKUP actually has 4 components: the search key, the range, the index, and if the data is sorted or not. So what I like to do is actually use this card. You can also click this little caret here, which will drop down and give you even more details about this function. That may be helpful for you to start with. And also I want to point out some of your screens might look like this right now, where there's just a question mark, there's no card. If you've minimized that card in the past, you're probably seeing the question mark. Click the question mark, you'll see the card. I generally keep this open. I've used these functions a lot, but it is really helpful to know and follow these guides. Google Sheets makes it so easy for you to learn how to use Google Sheets. There are so many integrated tools to help you do this, and that's part of the reason I love Google Sheets, is because it gives us all the tools we need to be effective in doing this. And so I'm going to use this card here. So the first thing is the search key. What that means is, what am I using to match up the data? In this case, we could use name, but I'm actually going to use the student ID because every once in a while we have 2 students with the same name or very similar names. And so that's maybe not quite reliable enough, but in most cases, our ID numbers should be unique. Every student should have one ID, not two, and two students shouldn't have the same ID. So that's usually pretty reliable. Most of us have a local identification number in our districts, or we could use a state identifier. Every student has a unique state number that that is assigned to them. So use that student ID when possible, and then click the comma to move us into the next component, in this case, the range. So what we're doing now is we're saying, where do you want me to search? I know what I'm searching for, but where am I going to do that? And so we're going to actually type in this other tab, more data. Now, when we type the tab title, you need to have apostrophes around the tab title because there's a space. If there's no space, like the tab down below we have called data, you wouldn't need those apostrophes. But because there's a space in more data, we need to have those apostrophes around the end. And then to move into the range portion of that, so that's the tab name, now we need to move into the range, which is going to be A through D. Just like that. Don't even need to have the row numbers in there. We're just going to do A through D. You could put A2 through D if you wanted, because that's where our data actually starts. But usually I don't, because it's just easier to just make sure we have the whole column here. Actually, you know what? I take that back. This is going to help us learn something here. Let's do A2 through D, because this is going to teach us an important principle with Google Sheets, and it'll be helpful. So we're just going to do A2 through D. So if you went back to the More Data tab and looked, you could see exactly where that data is. You can see it's going to be all four columns starting at cell A2 all the way down to the bottom. So that's where we're searching. We know what to search for. We know where we're searching. The next piece is, what do you want me to return? What are you going to bring back for me? So type a comma. You'll see our guide is moved to index. And index just means from our search key, from that first column, how many columns over is the thing you want me to return. In this case, it's the fourth column, so we're going to type in a 4. As soon as you type that, you'll notice it's kind of giving you a hint here. It's showing you, yep, I found it. This is the number I'm going to return. So it's 16. We'll go check that here in just a second. But there is one final piece here. If you type the next comma, you'll get this optional piece. Is the data sorted? Almost always I type false, because almost always my data is not sorted. Basically what that means is if your data was so big that you didn't want it to search through the whole thing, you just wanted to search through it in order, you would type in true here. I have really never come across a time where my data is so big that that's been important. And I almost always type false because I'd rather it just search through everything and make sure. It's a time-saving function of the VLOOKUP function. And so I'm not really concerned with that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and put our close parenthesis on and hit enter. And it's going to suggest that we fill down. And I'm actually going to do that this time. So I'm going to click the check because this is going to teach us something here in just a second. But let's confirm. It said 16 a minute ago, but now it's saying 12. So let's go confirm, does Carlos have a 12 for that Canvas quiz? So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy his name, come down to more data, Control F, Control V, and there is Carlos's row. He's not at the top, but he did in fact receive a 12, which is great. That means that it brought back the correct number for us. And let's go ahead and keep looking at these because we did fill down, and you'll probably notice something here. As I'm clicking into these, you'll notice it worked pretty well up here, but then all of a sudden we're starting to get errors. In fact, as we go down, we're getting more and more errors, which is a problem. Why are we getting errors? Well, let's take a look at our second column here. So you can see as I come down, it shifted down our search key, which is perfect. I want it to do the next student ID. That's correct. But you'll also notice it's shifting down our range. So instead of A2 through D, it's now only searching through A3 through D. And if I were to keep going down, now it's A4 through D. And so you can see my range is getting messed up here because I actually do want it to search through A2 through D every single time, not just not shifted down, but every single time. And so there's an important fix that we can put in here. I'm going to double click back into H2 where we started. That 2 that we put in, let's put a $sign in front of it and hit enter. It's going to appear like nothing changed. If we double click back into it, we can see that $sign is in place. What that $sign does is whichever piece of the range it's in front of, it is not going to shift it down. It's going to keep it steady for us, which is exactly what we want in this case. So now I'm going to click into H2. I'm going to click the little blue dot, and I'm going to fill all the way down through the bottom of our data and let go. And you'll notice now that actually took care of all of our errors because it fixed our range. And if you click into any of these other ones now, the search key is still shifting, but the range is not shifting. It's A2 through D, has not changed at all, which is exactly what we wanted. So a couple important things to recap there. Number one, a little bit more complicated function. We talked about how to use the guide from Google Sheets. Very important, very helpful, especially with functions you're not quite as familiar with. The second piece, we talked about kind of how we set up each component of a more complex function. So we have each piece separated by a comma. Some functions will only have one criteria, or some will have multiple pieces. It just depends on the function and the complexity. So that's really important. And then the final thing that we really talked about there is we used the VLOOKUP as an opportunity to talk about that dynamic range and the shifting of that range down when we make copies. That's a really important principle. You have to understand that when we start doing bigger and bigger sets of data, because it's really important to know when do you want the data to shift down and accurately move to the new row, and when don't I? You can do that same $sign principle with columns as well if you put it in front of the column letter. That can be helpful if you need to copy left to right and you don't want it to shift. So that's important to keep in mind as well. And that principle is really important. So let's go ahead then. That kind of recaps that part. So far we have talked about how to do a simple function like an average. We've talked about how to bring together data from another spreadsheet, another tab, and bring it into this tab. What I'd like to do next is talk a little bit about, we're going to take a look at this tab down here called filter sheet. And we're going to build a filter, a dynamic filter using Google Sheets. This is probably one of the most common things that I do with a spreadsheet when I'm working with teachers or principals or instructional coaches. Is the request is I really would like a dynamic filter, kind of a dynamic dashboard, so to speak, of the data that I'm looking at. So there are, if I go back here, there are some options here to do things like filtering. We can come up here to the columns, click the little caret, and we could sort all of by subject. That's really helpful. We could also sort by a given test. Maybe that Canvas quiz that we just brought in, I'd like to see that in order actually. And you can actually kind of stack this sorting on top of each other too. We could sort by the quiz and then now sort by the class. And you can see now I have, here's my whole class, my whole art class here in order from lowest to highest. That's really helpful for me. Here's language arts, same thing. Here's all my language arts scores, and I've done some of that sorting, and I'm starting to kind of filter down with my data. You can kind of see where we're headed here. Maybe now I can take, maybe these are the kids right here that really need some remediation. Maybe I need to pull a small group. Maybe this is my group of extension kids for this particular assessment, and I want to grab those students, create a small group for an extension opportunity or something like that. However, when you do that sorting, you'll notice your data changes. I'm going to undo those things, get back to where we were here, but it moves everything around, which is not really a problem. However, sometimes we filter and sort so much that we start to lose track of where we're at, and that's where this filter sheet idea comes in here. So let's take a look at some functions that will allow us to build a dynamic filter set of our data here, and really give us some analytical power when we're trying to maybe meet in our PLCs and we're trying to review data for a group of kids. So let's take a look at building a filter. So to set up a filter, we're going to come down into the filter sheet, and we're going to go into cell A7 right here. And I've added some extra rows up here at the top. You'll see why we did that here in just a moment. But we're going to start by going ahead and typing an equal sign again. So all functions start, and just start typing in filter. You won't have to type too far, and you'll see filter show up. And you should see our guide card pop up. Remember, if you don't, click on the little question mark. And we've got 2 required components here with the option to add more, but we're really just going to use 2. And so first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to filter the range that we want to work with. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in the tab name, raw data. I'm using that first tab that we have there, and make sure you use an apostrophe. I typed the wrong one. So remember, because that tab name has a space in it, we have to use an apostrophe around the whole thing, not quotations, an apostrophe. Then you add an exclamation mark to say that's the end of the tab name, and then we're going to add in the actual range of data, which in this case is A2 through H, I believe was our last column. I'll go confirm that if it doesn't work, but that should be it. A2 through H. It's going to be everything from cell A2 all the way down through the bottom of column H. And that's going to be the range that we are filtering. The next thing that we're going to do is put in our condition. And if you expand this card here, you can get some examples of conditions. You can see there is a range with some sort of logical expression, like in this case greater than, and then a number. If you keep, if you look at, there's a couple other ones here where, let's see, if you come all the way down to the bottom and learn more, I know they give us some more examples. Here we go. Here's several other ones here too, where you can put in some additional kind of requirements, the conditions, like here's an is not blank one. You've got a few others down here, and it goes into detail about what that can look like. So that can be helpful. What we're going to do right now is we're actually going to do, we're going to filter these by the course name, which is really a subject area for us. So I put in a comma, and we're going to go ahead and type in. Now we have to make sure that we use the tab title again, because we're not referring to just the data on this sheet. We're actually referring to the data on the raw data tab. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say cells C2 through C, and we are going to put in an equal sign, and then this portion of it goes in quotations, and I'm going to type in a subject. I'm going to do ELA to start, but you could type in any one of those subjects. Then we're going to put in our close parenthesis. So to unpack that, we have our filter, we have the range of data that we are filtering, and then we have the condition. So what I'm looking for here is all of the data where column C matches or is equal to ELA. And we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and we should see that populate here. Actually, you know what? Let's go back. I'm going to change that to actually be through I, because we had averages there too. In fact, I can add in the column title there too. So actually through I. And there we go. You can scroll down a little bit and you can see really quickly I have just the language arts classes there. If I click back into this, I could change that out. Let's say instead of doing ELA, let's do math. Hit enter. And there we go. Now I've got all the math students, which is really helpful. Now I can quickly see class by class, and I can just go into the function, do a quick switch, and I can see what's there. Now, before I go any further with this, we talked a little bit about how it can be helpful to do some sorting as well. This is a good opportunity to talk about how you can actually stack functions too. So I'm going to go out to the very beginning, right before the equal, or right after the equal sign, and I'm going to add in sort. Just type in sort with an open parenthesis, and there you'll see new function pops up. And so now I'm going to sort this. I'm going to expand this card so you can kind of see this here, some of the examples. So they have a range, and then they have a number to designate which column we want to sort by. So in this case, our range is the filtered data, all of this. And so at the very end of that, I'm going to add a comma, which is going to give us our sort function here. I'm going to sort by column E. So I'm just going to type in a 5 and then close parenthesis here. We're going to go ahead and hit, oh, that didn't work. Let's see. Why didn't it like our sort? Oh, the ascending piece. True. So there we go. I missed this one piece here. So the sort function actually has 3 components: range, sort column, and is ascending. If you did false, it would be descending. I'm just going to do is ascending and hit enter. There we go. And so now it's taken the exact same data that we had there. It's all of our math courses, but now it's put them in order of column A. And so there you can see from 11 was our lowest score all the way up through 25. So that's a good example of how we can stack functions. Now, when we're building kind of a dashboard like this, it's really helpful to actually not have to go into the function and make some of these changes. So I'm going to go up here in column C. I'm going to go ahead and type in math up here. And I want to show you how we can adjust this function. So I've just typed in the word math here on column C. And I'm going to actually remove this quotation mark part right here. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to select cell C4, which is right here. And I'm going to hit enter. It's going to probably look like nothing happened there because we were already selected on math. But let's change this now. Instead of saying math, let's change it to ELA. Or maybe let's type in the word art. There's our art class right there. And you could keep doing that for every single subject. You might be kind of seeing where we're headed here, but it'd be really great if we didn't have to type that in every time. So let's actually get rid of everything that's in there. All of our data is going to look like it disappears for a second. Go up to cell C4, right click, and we are going to insert a drop down. We talked about this drop down menu earlier. And all we need to do is just type in all of our answers or our subjects here. We could type in each one. However, there's actually one other thing we can do. This criteria up here at the top, there's actually a drop down from a range. So what I'm going to do is type in raw data C2 through C. And then that's the range. You may remember column C was where we had all of our subject data. So I'm going to actually just click off to the side out of this box, and there they all are. They all just popped right up. And so you can see them all listed right there. I'm going to go ahead and change these colors again. This is not super important, but it just kind of makes the aesthetics a little bit more pleasing. And we're going to click done. We'll exit out of that. And now I have a drop down up here. So now all I need to do is come in here and click. We're going to select the different subjects, and you can see the data is shifting. Oh, I clicked the edit button. Is shifting, and we're getting a new set of students every single time I click on this. Everything is still sorted, you'll notice, by test A. Let's say I wanted to change that. Go into your filter function. Let's go with column 6. My data changed slightly. We still have math students, but now the test that's sorted is actually test B. Maybe we want to go even further. Maybe we want to actually sort by the average. I think that's column 10, if I'm counting right. Nope, I'm not. Let's do column 9, actually. Column 9 is our average column. And there you go. Now I've got all my students and they're sorted by the average. This might be, oh, these students are doing really well. I'm maybe not worried about those students. These students down here, I might be concerned. I might, they're trending in the lower range. That might be some students I want to take a look at. So at this point now, we have created this interactive dashboard where we can see all of the same data that we saw over here. But now on my filter sheet, I can quickly compare different pieces of that data. The next thing that I want to do with this is I want to start looking at, it'd be really great if we started to put some analytics up here. Let's go ahead and do an average equals average of E7 through E. Oops, I forgot my open parenthesis. There we go. And we'll hit enter. It'd also be really great if I had that for all my tests. I'm going to click the little blue dot, drag over, and there we've got averages for all 4 of those assessments. You could even do an average of the averages if you wanted to. Let's remove some decimal points there, kind of like we did earlier. And now, as I interact with our drop down, you'll notice I'm getting different averages for each assessment for each class. And so you can see we can continue building on this. We could even go through, let's say I didn't want to do averages. Let's say I wanted a count. We're going to do a function called COUNTIF. You just start typing that in. And there we go. We're going to do a COUNTIF of E7 through E. So we're going to count all of the numbers below there, add in a comma, and I'm going to do, let's do greater than. So in quotes, you can see here with the guide, this criteria is a little different than the one we did with our filter function. In quotes, I'm going to do greater than or equal to 20. Close, whoops, quotation mark, then close parenthesis. Go ahead and hit enter. There we go. We've got 4 kids who are greater than 20. Let's switch our subjects and see what happens. Yeah, in math, I've got 7 kids who are greater than 20. I'm going to jump down. I'm going to skip this one and come down here. We're going to do the same thing. COUNTIF. Same range, E7 through E. This time, our range is going to be less than 15. And hit enter right there. I had already adjusted the decimal points for this, which is why we're getting a decimal. That's not actually important now that I've changed it. So now we've got 7 kids who are 20 and above, and I've got 15 kids who are less than 20. Next up, I'm looking for what are those students. In fact, let's go ahead and set these here. We'll set that to green. We'll do red here, and our middle group is going to be yellow. Okay, in order to do this middle one, there isn't an in-between. And so we actually need to do some subtraction here. So what we're going to do is COUNTIF. We are going to count all of the students, E7 through E, that are less than 20. Oh, excuse me. Thinking about this wrong. We're going to do greater than or equal to 15. So we're doing all the students who are greater than or equal to 15. And then we're going to subtract all of the students. We're going to do another COUNTIF. All the students, E7 through E. And now we're going to do all the students who are greater than or equal to 20. Basically what we're doing is we're doing everybody above 15, and then we're subtracting everybody above 20. And we're going to hit enter. And ideally here, let's count. I'm going to highlight all the data, and I want to see how many do we have here. We have 22 total. And if we did this right, 7 plus 9 plus 3, that should equal 22. Yep, we've got all of them. Okay. So now I've got a count of all the students who are, good to go. These are students who, probably don't need to worry about them. These students, maybe I need to address some things. These students we've got some concerns about. And then the nice thing is with all these, you can go ahead and click all 3 of them. And I'm just going to click that blue dot and shift them all over. Now we've got our counts for every single test right there. Because when we copy left to right, things shift over. So we went from E to F to G to H, and it automatically shifts all that over. And so now we can quickly see, for math, I can see how many students do I have in each group. I can see test C went really well. I can see that, test F and test H, not so much. We had less greens, more yellows, and even some reds. And the nice thing about this is all of these are dynamic depending on which subject area I'm selected in here too. So we can switch to different subjects and all of those functions are going to change for us. So that is the power of having that filter function along with the drop down and some of these other functions. You can see now we are building, we've got one function over here, we've got a whole group of functions up here. We have the averages that we brought over on the first tab, and we have all those Canvas quizzes that we brought over with the VLOOKUP function. So we're kind of bringing together all of these pieces into one place, which is, it starts to get really powerful because we now have this interactive and dynamic spreadsheet where we can start doing a lot of different things. So to kind of round out our training today, we're going to jump into what I think is probably one of the most powerful functions in Google Sheets. And so we're going to head over and take a look at these tabs down here at the bottom. We have this one called a grades report and this one called an attendance report. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. We're going to talk about another function that's going to bring together some data for us when maybe it's not just one piece of data like we did with VLOOKUP. Maybe it's a group of data, and we're going to take a look at a function called the query function. So these two tabs down here are examples of what you might see if you were to export data from another system, maybe from your SIS or an assessment system or something like that. And I got two particular reports. One is a grades report, one is an attendance report. And let's say from that system that there wasn't a report that did both. And you're preparing for conferences, and it'd be really great if you could have the grades report and the attendance report all in one place. Now, this is kind of a hypothetical situation. Chances are you do have a report that does both of those, but this is just kind of some made-up data here. So I've got some kind of, final scores for Q3 in the grades data here. So you can see I've got same student numbers we were working with before. I've got some fake grades this time, grade levels. I've got the same names we were working with. And then I've got their term grade over here. And then if you look at the attendance report, it's very similar. We've got names, we've got the student numbers, and then we've also got a bunch of different attendance data like excused, unexcused, tardies, and so on. And it'd be really great if all of this information from up here at the top, I'm going to actually copy those headers, and I'm going to come over here to the grades report, and I'm going to just paste in those headers. Because that's what we're going to do is we're going to bring together this data and bring it over here. Now, we know from doing the VLOOKUP function that we could use that. However, if we did, we would need a VLOOKUP function for every single column here and every single student. That's actually quite a bit. It would be nice if there was a way that we could do that where maybe the function, we didn't have so many functions. There is a time in Google Sheets where if you have tons and tons of data, and you have a function that you need to have multiple times, it can bog down the system. Google is constantly making improvements. They just recently made some big speed improvements to Google Sheets. But any way that we can kind of speed up the process is helpful. And so that's where we're going to use this function. Today, we're going to use it to join together two groups of data. But this function can be used for a lot of other things. It can do analytical data like counts and greater thans, less thans. It can also be used to filter data, like we used the filter option earlier. But today, we're going to use it to bring together two groups of data. And so what we're going to do is we're going to type in cell J2 here. We're going to start typing in that query function, open parenthesis, and we've got three parts here. Two required, one is optional. The first one is the data that we're going to be connecting. So I'm going to go ahead and type in attendance summary report, and that is in apostrophes. And if I remember right, I am pretty sure that the student ID was actually in the third column. So we're actually just going to do C through, let's see, I think our data ended over in maybe K or L. I'm going to do L right now. So attendance, I spelled attendance wrong. There we go. Attendance summary report, C through L, and I'll go adjust those if needed. And let's go ahead and I'm going to type in a comma. And then this is the next section here where we actually put in the request that we're doing here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and type, this all goes in quotes, and we're going to do select, and we're going to do CD, you're going to type out each column that we want returned. C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and L. I may need to go revise that in a second here. Basically what I want it to do is return all of those columns where C matches, we want it to match our student ID column over here, which is actually B2. Now, the way the query function works is when we build that query string, we need to kind of break it to get out and grab other data on our sheet. And so in this case, we're going to go ahead and type in an apostrophe, a quote, this is quite a string, an ampersand, then B2, and then close it with the same thing, the ampersand, the quote, and the apostrophe. Basically what we're saying here is return all those columns where column C matches the ID number that we have here. Kind of like what we did with VLOOKUP, but now we're able to do it all with one function instead of multiple VLOOKUP functions. And then to close this entire query string off, we need the quote. Quote at the beginning with select and quote at the end. And then we can go into our very last section here, which is the headers. I don't actually want any headers, so I'm going to put in a 0, and we're going to do a close parenthesis, and we're going to hit enter. And there we go. We are getting more data than I had wanted. So let's go back. I think I actually have one extra. Yep. So instead of starting with C like I did, I really should have started with D with that term right there. So let's go back. I'm going to adjust. So we're actually going to return that. There we go. Now everything is lined up. Term. Then we've got the counts of the excused, unexcused, tardies, and so on. Great. And now what we can do, as long as we set everything up correctly, we should be able to grab our little blue dot and drag all the way down. And there we have all of that student data. Even though these students are in different orders, you know, we can see up here we've got Carlos up here at the top, but over here Carlos is actually down here in column 6. You can see there's the 4s for the absences. If we look at Carlos here, yep, there's our 4s right there. So that query function really is the start of a lot of things. There are a lot of different things that we can do with that. You can see just by putting in those functions here in column J, we brought together really big chunks of data. But we could start doing more things with that. Instead of just bringing the data together, we can start doing some things like counting, returning counts of that data. We can start doing a lot of the things. We can filter it down. We can start analyzing it a little bit, getting the minimum, the maximum, getting averages, and so on. There's a lot of different opportunity there. And so I know I went through that last little piece very quickly, and we just used it for a specific purpose, but there really are a lot of different things that you can do with that query function. So I hope that has been really helpful. Those are kind of all the things that I wanted to accomplish in today's training. We started with the average, we did a VLOOKUP, we did the filters, the counts, we did drop downs, and then we ended with that query function bringing together bigger chunks of data as well. So we really accomplished quite a bit. I'm going to jump back to my presentation, and we're going to quickly end with a couple resources that might be helpful for you. So to wrap up, here are a couple things that you might find helpful. There's not a great way I know in the video to get to some of these links, but feel free to just Google these things. You will definitely find some support there. There are some built-in tools like we looked at today, like those cards for each function. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you get to learn more. You'll get that. The other thing I would check out is Google Sheets functions list, and you'll get a whole list of all the functions that are available in Google Sheets, which might be really beneficial to you. There are support pages and support forums that you can use. The other thing that you can always do is take a look at some of these great AI tools. If you're using School AI or Magic School in your district, or if you have access to Google Gemini or ChatGPT or any of those those different large language models. There's a few others out there that are great as well. Ask questions about these functions to your AI model that you're using. If you're struggling with the query function, try to describe what you're doing. Ask, how would I change my query function? Or I'm working with filter and I'm trying to filter for grade level, but it's not working. Those AI models are really great at guiding you through using functions. Make sure you tell the AI model that you are going to be using Google Sheets, and just start asking some questions about, my quiz scores are in column F, and my student ID is in column 1, and so on. And start kind of inquiring, getting as specific as possible with your request, and those AI models are going to do a really good job of returning some great responses to help you kind of really level up with your Google Sheets use. The only thing I will say there is, if you're going to be using an AI model, just make sure that you're cautious about any student data that you are sharing. Use general terms like, my ID numbers are in column A, instead of saying, here's all my data and just review this for me. You definitely don't want to do that with a tool that we don't have a data sharing agreement with. And just be cautious with that, right? You don't want to unintentionally share any of your students' educational data with an AI model. The other place that I go, I've taken a few classes through Ben Collins, but he has some great resources on Google Sheets. Much of it is far more advanced than I am able to do, but much of it is also really helpful for the day-to-day Sheets user as well. He's got a weekly email you can sign up for and a lot of great resources. And then the final thing is make sure you sign up for GEG Utah. This is our Utah Google Educator Group. We've got a lot of people who are really great with all the Google tools, and we'd be happy to help and support you with Google Sheets or other Google tools. And feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to respond and give you some suggestions and ways that you can hopefully solve whatever Google Sheets challenge it is. So I hope you're enjoying USAT. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I hope you enjoy the new Google Sheets things that we got to talk about this year. Each year we're going to try and add more and more to this training. So I hope you really appreciated that. Have a great rest of your conference.